God's clearing. Verse 8 says, Deborah, that Rebekah's nurse died, and she was buried beneath Bethel under an oak. And the name of it was called Elon Bekuth. For quite a while I could not understand why at this juncture Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died. There are no wasted words in the Bible. Deborah was a nurse to Jacob's mother, Rebekah. Rebekah must have died prior to Jacob's return. Thus, Deborah must have been very clear to Jacob as a comfort in place of his mother. At the precise time Jacob had the experience of battle, Deborah, his comfort, was taken away by God. As many of us can testify, when we put away the foreign gods, purify ourselves, changed our garments, and came into the church life, God intervened to take away our Deborahs, our nursing mothers. Many of us had a Deborah, someone or something loving, sympathizing, and soothing. But the day we came into the church life, God spontaneously took our nurse away, and our Deborah died. The church life is a life that does not require a nurse. None of the church people needs a nursing mother. But sorry to say, some of us still like to have some nurses to sympathize with us and to soothe and to comfort us, like a mother taking care of an infant. Any word spoken positively regarding nursing mothers is addressed to babes. After being in the church for so long, do you still need someone to nurse you? Nevertheless, even the older ones still desire a Deborah to soothe and care for them. But if we mean business with the Lord for better, He will remove our nurses. In these verses, we see that three things were buried: the idols, the earrings, and the nurse. All were buried under an oak. The oak is a symbol of flourishing life. Hence, all the foreign gods, the self-beautifying items, and the nurses are buried under the flourishing life, especially the life in the church. This is not a doctrine, but something that corresponds to our experience. The life in the church flourishes like an oak tree, but underneath it are the Deborahs. We put off the idols and remove the earrings, but God caused our Deborah to die. This is a real purification, both from our side and from God's side. We put away and God took away. We put away the foreign gods, the earrings, the pollutions and garments, and God took away the nurses. In the church life, we do not need sympathy or nursing. All our Deborahs must be buried. The oak under which Deborah was buried was beneath Bethel. This indicates that our experience of the taking away and the burying of our Deborahs is not on a high plane. Rather, it is beneath the level of the church. The church as the house of God is on the highest plane, and here in the church we must have some experiences that are also on the highest plane, such as the experience of Christ as our life and our person. To experience the barrier of our Deborahs is rather low, is beneath Bethel. Hence, the barrier oak was called Elon Bekuth, the oak of weeping. This is not a matter worthy of our rejoicing. Life Study of Genesis, Message 79, Being Transformed. Genesis contains the seeds of nearly all the truths in the Bible. If we observe this principle, whether we come to certain points in this book, we shall recognize that they are developed in the following books of the Bible. In other words, in order to understand any point in Genesis, we need to trace its development elsewhere in the scriptures. Without the other books, we simply cannot understand Genesis. Genesis is not merely a book of stories. If we would derive the life, the supply and revelation, and the vision from all the points found in the book of Genesis, then we must follow their development in all the subsequent books of the Bible. The truth concerning the house of God was sown in chapter 28. If you read the Bible carefully, you'll see that the house of God was first mentioned in this chapter. The house of God, Bethel, is mentioned in relation to a vision granted to Jacob in a very extraordinary way. Firstly, Jacob had a dream, and then his dream was interpreted under divine inspiration. In his dream, Jacob saw the heavens open and a ladder set up on the earth extending from earth to heaven. Upon the ladder, the angels of God were ascending and descending. With any dream, we firstly have the facts in the dream and then the proper interpretation. Jacob did not have a Daniel to interpret his dream for him. Instead, this supplanter became his own Daniel. He certainly did an excellent job interpreting his dream, saying, "How dreadful is this place! This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." Jacob said that this place better was dreadful. If you would go to heaven, you must pass through this dreadful place, for the house of God is the gate of heaven. After his dream, Jacob also made a vow, saying, "If God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat, and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God." Instead of speaking to God in an intimate prayer, he made a vow. As part of his vow, Jacob said that the stone which he had set up for a pillar would be God's house. In Jacob's vow, we see a further interpretation of his dream. Upon waking, Jacob said that place was the house of God. Then he promised that the stone he used for a pillow would be built up into God's house. We see here that the house of God will be built with the stone, which was Jacob's trust. The stone that Jacob used as a pillow is a shadow, a prefigure, a type of Christ. Only Christ is the real rock that can be the pillow upon which we can lay our very head. The very Christ on whom we rest will become the house of God. This is the material for building the house of God. In Genesis 28, we have the first mention of the stone for God's building. Of course, in chapter 2, the only stone is mentioned, but it is mentioned in a clear way. The stone which is our trust will become the house of God. This means that the Christ whom we experience as our rest and trust will become the building material for God's house. In chapter 35, the vision of Bethel came again. This time, however, it did not come just as a dream. It came as a reality. It was not only a vision, but a fact and an experience. The difference between chapters 28 and 35 is that chapter 28 was merely a dream. Bethel, the gate of heaven, the ladder, the angels, everything was seen in a dream. At most, we can only say that this dream was a vision. Up to that point, there was no fact, no reality. The fulfillment of the dream comes into being in chapter 35.